and welcome to the third episode of the Katie and Siegfried Show. Today we're going to talk about Arlington National Cemetery.
That's right. So I guess I'll start with a brief history of how many times I've been there, stuff like that, and then I'll let you explain how many times you've been there, or however you want to deal with it. But I've been there recently, in the last, couple of years, twice. Prior to that, I don't honestly remember how many times I've been there. I've been there at least once, probably more than that, though, when I was younger. I'm sure I've been there a couple times, because when I went there recently, I definitely remembered a lot of the stuff that I had seen there. But yeah, so that's just my brief history of how often I visited. So yeah.
For me, I've been there a couple times. As a visitor, on Memorial Day 2018 and 2019, and then I actually used to work there, so I've been there more times than I can count.
All right, so you've seen
pretty much everything, except the Arlington House. I've never been in there because that was run by the Park Service, and I did not work for the Park Service.
Okay, yeah, I haven't been in the Arlington House either, which we'll explore probably towards the end, because there's a lot of stuff to get through prior to that, since that's technically separate in terms of who runs that part.
Yeah, the cemetery itself is run by the Department of Defense, since it's a military cemetery, and the Arlington House is run by the National Park Service, which is part of the Department of the Interior. So both government run, but different parts of the government.
Okay. So what I want to start with is it had been a while since I've been there, so I remember the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, and I remembered some other parts. But it was very interesting to me this time with, an older person, as an adult, to go there and have a better understanding of A, history, and B, just a better view on things, and in terms of noticing details, right? So
right.
When I went there when I was younger, you see the big things like the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, that's gonna stick with you, but you see a little plot or a little area for a specific group of Civil War soldiers or something, you're not really gonna remember that as much. So it was nice when I went there this time. I read all of the little plaques in the visitor center that goes through the different areas of the cemetery, and it talks about how there's Civil War soldiers, a few Revolutionary War soldiers, I believe. Yeah, so stuff like that, and then it also talks about, interestingly enough, the European versions of the cemetery, basically their cemeteries for their war dead.
Yeah, we kind of stole the idea from the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier from Europe. So
right, and so that was fascinating because they had some pictures of that and showed the differences and how they deal with that, and also just generally very high level, here's where they put something for their war dead, their soldiers who have passed in war. It was fascinating to see that how there's differences, but it's almost very similar to what we do now, and how we treat our soldiers after they've passed. It's very nice, you walking through the cemetery, how they have it set up. They do a very good job of delineating different what's the word I'm looking for? There's different markers for this tree is in honor of this group of soldiers in World War II, things like that, and then they've done a very good job of keeping the tombstones, etc., nice and clean. You can very easily read the names. They seem to do a good job of that. And it was very interesting when I went in, because had I not been told, I probably would have gone the wrong way. There were some areas that were closed off. They were pretty clearly closed off, though, so that was nice that you would know not to walk somewhere, right?
Well, most people know not to walk there. As someone who used to work there, I had to kick people out of construction zones or things like that, so...
Right, that's fair.
So some people are dumb.
But it was nice, because they had the nice memorial for Kennedy, of course, the Never-Ending Flame.
Yeah, there's the Eternal Flame, which is something Jackie really wanted.
Right.
So.
And then a couple of his family members are there, and then I think Robert was nearby.
Yeah, so we're buried right next to Kennedy are Jackie, and then his son Patrick, who died when he was a couple days old. He was 3 days old. And then they had a stillborn daughter as well that was buried with them. But neither JFK Jr. or Caroline, when she passes, will be buried with them. It's because if you're a child, you can only be buried if you're a minor. If you're an adult, like JFK Jr. or Caroline will be, you can't be buried there. So that's why the two of the kids are buried there, but two of them are not. But like Siegfried mentioned, Robert Kennedy, the brother, is buried there, and also, so yeah, Robert's there, Ted is there as well. And there's a memorial to a third brother who passed away in World War II. He was killed in action in Europe. They're all right there nearby as well. And also, Ruth Bader Ginsburg is near JFK.
Okay.
And Thurgood Marshall.
I remember. So they have I think it's relatively newer. The women's like museum kind of thing.
Yeah, there's a Women's and Military Service Memorial, or like Women Military Service for America Memorial. It's pretty near the main entrance. It's relatively new, last 25 years.
Yeah, I don't think I went there last time. I could be wrong. But this time around, I did go, and it was very nice to walk through it. They had a lot of exhibits explaining, their women's impact on the different wars. Primarily early on, it was like nursing, jobs and roles like that.
Yeah.
And also supplying, like, making supplies for the war effort and things like that, which is fascinating. And, it went on to, even to modern day, to explain, like, what they do now and how their impacts are now, which was interesting. But yeah, the whole trek to the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier is very, it's very, I don't know what the correct term is, because it's not, it's very somber, because, obviously there's a lot of, it's cemetery, so there's a lot of tombstones everywhere, like, you're walking past, you're walking past a lot of these, and, like, you're just feeling the weight of war, on the way to the tomb, and then you get there, and, like, it's wonderfully done, because there's a nice, it sits over a very nice view, which is a very interesting contrast, but I think, on the other hand, like, it kind of reminds us of, like, hey, these soldiers, even the unknown soldiers, this is what they were fighting for, right? Like, you can look past and you'll see civilization, you'll see the U.S.
You'll see D.C., which is, seat of power kind of deal.
Right, you'll see the U.S., so it's like, obviously that's not representative of all the U.S., but, like, it at least gives you the sense of, like, hey, like, they died fighting for us, right? And I think it's well done, the guards are very professional there. They keep time very precisely. They do a very good job.
Yeah.
It was very hot out there. I don't know how they're dealing with that. But they never once stepped out of line or made any kind of indication that they were uncomfortable. I got in on a good day because, as far as I could tell, everyone was respectful. No one was trying to jump over any fences or anything like that.
Yeah. The tomb guards are very, like Siegfried said, very precise. They take 21 steps across the mat and then face the tomb for 21 seconds and then back and forth and back and forth. And during the, between April and October, so between April 1st and October 1st, they change out every half an hour, so that way they don't get, like, too hot. But between October, 1st and then March 30th, they change out every hour. So it's the changing the guards, whole, 10-minute ritual, and it's very, very precise, again.
Yes.
Showing, military, very precise kind of.
Yeah, and it's very respectful of the dead.
Yeah.
I think, yeah.
And so the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier is a couple people buried in it. We don't, again, unknown soldier. We don't know who they are. One person's from World War I, one person's from World War II, and another person's from the Korean War. There was somebody from Vietnam there, but he later got identified using DNA technology, and his family asked that he be buried out in St. Louis, so he is now identified and buried in St. Louis.
And they're not going to replace him, correct?
Correct, because a lot, since, the Vietnam War, the technology's gotten a lot better, and we're able to identify more and more.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's interesting.
But, going back to, say, World War I, those, a little over 100 years ago, it's a lot harder
Right.
to do that. Whereas the Vietnam War was, it was a lot more recent. So.
Right, and to make it clear, as far as I know, the soldiers that were identified to be buried there for the Revolutionary War and Civil War were previously identified.
Yes.
So we know who they were, so that's why they're not in that.
Yeah, but there's actually a separate Civil War unknown tomb.
Okay.
Up by the Arlington House, and that has the remains of about 2,000 Civil War unknown soldiers from it. But they decided to have like a separate one for post World War One.
Okay. I didn't know that part. Yeah. I knew that the soldiers that I had read about on the plaque there were pre-selected, known. So yeah, it was very nice though, because they do have a very nice map. So if you want to go around and see all these different little areas, it's on the map. It's well identified. I mean, even if you just walk around, you won't go very far without stumbling into a plaque for a specific group. It's quite nice. You know, I mean, I really like that fact that, like, you can go around, like, this tree is in honor of this specific group. This tree is in honor of this specific group. It's nice to know that they're all remembered. And it's very nicely organized. There were some areas that I wanted to go into. I don't know exactly what they were, but for whatever reason, they were closed off temporarily. Most likely construction or something was going on, which is fair. And, you know, when I go back next time, maybe I'll explore those areas. But the nice thing was, at least for now, they are not charging for entry, at least for parking or anything like that. So it was nice to go in. It wasn't very hard parking-wise. It was pretty packed. Parking lot though, I'll say that much. Like, I didn't have terribly much trouble getting a parking spot, but like I could certainly see at certain points it might be harder than others.
Yeah, like some days, like Veterans Day, Memorial Day, that kind of deal.
Right.
Would be harder. But yeah, they used to charge for parking, but they don't anymore. So, or at least as of September, they didn't charge parking. I was last there in September.
Okay.
So.
Right, but you mentioned the Arlington House, and I want to talk about that a little bit. Yeah. I didn't get to see it, but we could talk at least about the history of the house and kind of give an explanation for why Arlington National Cemetery is where it is.
Yeah, so the Arlington House was built in the early 1800s by George Washington Parke Custis, who was Martha Washington's grandson. And now, to be clear, he was not related to George Washington technically, because Martha had 2 marriages. The first one was to a man named Daniel. The second one was to George Washington. Her grandson was from her first marriage. So he technically was like George Washington's step-grandson.
Right.
So that's how he's related to the Washingtons. And he built the house overlooking Washington, D.C. as a way to like honor his step-grandfather, because he'd actually been partially raised by his grandma and step-grandfather after his parents had passed. So he was very fond of his step-grandfather. And then the house was built, and he had one surviving child, who was Robert E. Lee's wife. So she inherited the property. Her name was Mary, and so she inherited property, and Robert E. Lee lived there for a couple decades. That's how it actually got turned into a cemetery, because it got taken over at the beginning of the Civil War. The Lees had left. The Union took it over. Part of is, this is Robert E. Lee's house, we kind of want it kind of deal. But also, if you're up by the Arlington House and you look over the hill at D.C., if you put a couple cannons there, you're gonna, shoot out D.C. relatively quickly in a span of a couple of days. So the Union soldiers didn't want D.C. to be gone. They learned that from the War of 1812.
So it was very strategic decision making as well.
It was strategic.
Also, the optics of, hey, we got Robert E. Lee's house, one of the lead general in the Confederacy.
Yeah.
Not exactly, great for morale for them, because it kind of rubbing it in their face that, hey, we took over, your lead general's house.
To be clear, after the Civil War, the Lee's son ended up taking the federal government to court, and he got money for it.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, that's. I mean, the Civil War is a whole nother topic, but it's just interesting how our Civil War ended, and a lot of it was much more friendly, so to speak, in terms of like how things were handled after that. In certain ways, it definitely splintered poorly, but like in a lot of ways, there was a lot of, hey, we'll forgive past deeds to like move on, you know.
Yeah. But yeah, they turned this house into a cemetery.
But yeah, you can. So. The nice thing is you can see the Arlington House very easily from most of the cemetery. I know that place in particular does have an entrance fee.
It's $1.
Right. I mean, it's not much, right? It's $1, but like that is important to note that it does have an entrance fee. Just so don't show up and not expect, you know.
Yes.
Unfortunately, I didn't go there that day. Any of the 2 times I went there recently.
Yeah.
So I'll definitely go back, and I definitely want to hit that particular spot.
Yeah. The times I went in 2018 and 2019 to Arlington Cemetery, Arlington House was under renovation, and it actually just got finished this past summer. But that's why I haven't been either.
Yeah, so, I'd say it was a good trip. It was nice to see how the soldiers are memorial. Because, like, again, it's very interesting how different countries do it, but, like, for the most part, we're pretty similar to the Europeans. There are some minor differences I don't remember offhand, but if you read the plaques in there, it'll explain. But it's just interesting, because, like, you know, we are one of the countries that, like, at least in modern times and, like, more recently, like, we very much are very pro-military in a sense, like, societally?
Yeah, that sounds right.
On a societal level.
Yeah.
Which wasn't always the case, obviously, because, you know, back, way back, Revolutionary War era, people were not very happy about the military because it was the British military at the time, and they were, you know, just occupy your house whenever they want to, you know, and like,
house and home.
You know, like, you don't have any say in it, you know, you can't have, some of them weren't even, like, actually probably a good majority of them, you know, in certain cases, might not even be from the Americas. Some of them probably would be, but, like, you know, so, like, yeah, there's a lot of animosity there, and, like, I think that in part kind of probably harmed the Revolutionary Army as well to an extent, but, like, over time, it's been interesting to see how America's shifted more towards, like, hey, like, our military is something to be celebrated, and, like, we should memorialize them and be very respectful about that aspect. Like, especially, like, agree or disagree with military things, like, I think most Americans can agree that it's important to be respectful of them when they pass, and especially if they die in wartime.
Yeah.
Which is interesting just to see the contrast over time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But yeah, it's very nice. It's well done. Like I said, the map is great. It's a great guide to, like, hey, you can go here, you can go there, you can see these people's graves. The other one I did not get to go to was Audie Murphy's grave. I wanted to go there because I've heard it's a very uniquely designed one, more elaborate than some of the others.
No.
I'm wrong.
Yeah, so he was one of the most highly decorated World War II veterans like ever. He won like so many medals in World War II. A lot of people know him for being an actor and a musician after World War II. But his tomb is very plain, and that's the way he wanted it. So.
Okay.
That's the way he wants it. That's the way he gets it.
I must have gotten some bad information on that front then.
Yeah.
I heard differently. I guess I heard somewhere else. I don't
know.
But yeah, it was nice. I mean, there were some graves that had more spectacular, so to speak.
Designs?
Yes, designs.
Yeah.
It wasn't exactly clear to me as to why, but my guess is that the family gets to decide. Or the soldier potentially might say prior to that, like, hey, here's how I want to be buried. And, like, I don't know how much say they have, but, like, it seems like the family or somebody in the process has some kind of say, at least partially.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I'd say overall, like, it was very respectful. I mean, for the most part, people seem to do a good job of being quiet and, like, reflecting on it and, like, not disturbing the peace. Some people did. For the most part, those that did were either children or having conversations amongst themselves, not being very loud, just, you know.
Yeah, but the graves, yes, like Sigmar pointed out, some of them were more elaborate than the others. In the past, it was allowed that you could have whatever gravestone you wanted. There are cemetery issued ones, but if you or your family decided to have a more elaborate one, that was fine. But they stopped doing that a couple years ago because they were running out of space, and the cemetery issued ones are smaller than the ones the families would choose. Um, and side note, the cemetery cleans the cemetery issued ones, but if you had chosen to get your own gravestone, not the cemetery issued one, your family would be responsible for cleaning that themselves. So.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, I know. I don't recall if I saw any funerals being done that day. I think we might have actually, because I believe we saw some. No, I can't remember. It's hard to say. I'd have to ask those who were with me that day.
Okay.
We might have seen a procession. I can't remember. It's hard to remember because it's very hot and like we were not. None of us brought water, which was not the brightest idea. Thankfully, they do have water fountains throughout the cemetery, so it's not like a huge deal if you don't bring water. There's water throughout the cemetery. A and B at the visitor center, you can buy water. There's also water fountains there.
Yeah. That's another thing. If you do go to Arlington Cemetery, make sure you wear good shoes, proper clothing, and bring water. Because the distance between the visitor center, where everyone has to go through for security, and then between that and the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier is about a mile. So, if you're, for whatever reason, don't want to walk that mile, there is a shuttle that will take you there, a little tram. You do have to pay for that, though.
Yeah, and then I'd say the last things I have to say on this is when you come back, I went through the gift shop.
You bought a spoon?
Yes, I bought a collectible spoon. They have like most of the historical places we've gone to, it's a good selection. They have books, they have magnets, they have little keychain things, key fob things, like
keychains that you can put on your
things like that. Yeah. They have collectible items. Like I said, they do sell water. That's not the primary function of the shop, but yes, they have pretty much one of everything. Postcards, stuff like that.
And you can also, if you have a National Park Service booklet, you can get a Arlington stamp on there, because since the Arlington House is a National Park Service site, you can get the booklet stamped.
Do you need to go to the Arlington House to get it stamped?
No, you can get it in the gift shop down here.
Okay.
In the visitor center. You can also go up to the gift shop at the Arlington House if you want, but if you don't want to or forget, you can get it stamped in the gift shop at the visitor center, which is by the parking lot. So.
Okay. Yeah. I'd say the walk wasn't terribly difficult or confusing. They do have good signage there. As another final note, we did stop and ask one of the
visitor information assistants.
Yes, we asked one of them just to make sure we were on the right path where the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier is, and he pointed it out like, yeah, you just go this way and turn right. I'm like, okay, that's exactly what we thought, but it's good to verify.
Yeah.
But yeah. That's all I have to say about it. It was a great trip. I definitely will go back again. Yeah. I want to see the Arlington House for sure. Yeah, I think it's a trip that should be done every few years, just to get like a sense of what war has cost. Because I think part of the problem is just a lot of people view it as like it's far away. So like this is a good way to bring it home to you if you don't have family in the military. Yeah. Or if you want to see the scale of what the human cost in a war is, at least from one country's side.
Yeah. Yeah. So, on a side note, about the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, if you make a lot of noise, the guards will yell at you. If you cross the fence, the guards will yell at you. If you basically aren't don't follow the rules near the tomb, which is basically don't make noise, be respectful, the guards will yell at you. So FYI, if anyone wants to go. And multiple times a day, people would be yelled at by the guards. It wasn't an enjoyable experience for them. So, don't get yelled at by the guards. Is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Okay. I don't have any other final thoughts. Do you have any other final thoughts?
I don't have any other final thoughts. If you enjoyed this, like, comment, subscribe.
Okay.
Thank you to my Aunt Stacy for subscribing.
I'll say one final thing actually that did pop in my head is, I know we said we might talk about Battlefields next, but that got co-opted by this because I think this just is more recent in both of our memories.
Yeah.
Because the last time I went to a Battlefield was when I went to Gettysburg years and years ago.
Oh, the most recent Battlefield I went to was Yorktown, and that was last year, so.
But, so we'll probably talk about that in the future. That's kind of similar, actually, to how I felt here. It's very, it's a very interesting experience to, like, kind of realize what happened there,
Yeah.
Okay, that's all for this week.
And, we do have an email, too.
Okay.
If
you want to...
khsrshow@gmail.com.
All right, sounds good. Thank you for listening. Have a great day.